Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. If everybody could please rise. American motion the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good news. Greg, you got any good news for us? Or?
Well, I do. Tomorrow all the administrators are back in. We're getting ready to gear it up. We've seen, of course this is my experience of 1 year in central office, but steady influx of students coming in. We're averaging 6, 7 every day for the last 2 weeks, some days a little more. Another good news thing, we just interviewed a special education teacher at 4:45. She comes in with a wealth of experience and administrative experience to boot, so we're going to tender an offer to her. Mike Smith found projected $26,000 in savings on Compass, the school Compass, on $25,000 for electric, $1,000 on gas, just by switching to a different rate use that they recommended. He's been going out to the consumers and asking for efficiency proposals from everybody on how we can save money. Compass was the one where we hit the jackpot. Okay, that's it.
Awesome. All right, that brings us to our first public comment portion of the meeting. It's on agenda items only. Because the limit is 4, speaker is limited to 3 minutes. If you'd like to speak, please come to the podium and state your name. Okay, we'll move on. And this brings us to revisions, approval of the agenda.
I'd like to add a revision to add a discussion item about adding a newsletter. And then I also request to move the building handbook under action items up to discussion, please. Can I get a motion for those? Support.
We have one other. The facilities update will be on the 26th. Mike will have some more information that he can bring in and share with you.
All right, so let's make a motion to remove facilities update, add newsletter to discussion items, and also the building handbooks to discussion items.
So moved.
Support. Roll call.
No.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All right, motion carries. So that'll bring us to our schedule reports, monthly finance report.
I don't have much to say about this month. July is, it's just on.
Ooh,
Nice, fancy.
Okay, I don't have much to say about July. It's the slowest month we have. You'll see in the check register, there are a lot of the annual licenses, the renewals of everything you can think of. Other than that, it's all your typical monthly reports. Do you guys have any questions on those for July? Okay.
And I'm not sure if you're the one to ask, but I'll start with you. The Northwest evaluation checks, it says map growth, K2 and then 3 through 8. What exactly is that? Do you know, anybody?
NWEA.
Oh, that's NWEA, okay. And then the Wells Fargo vendor,
Yes.
12,000.
Yep. That's $6,200 a month. That's the lease on the copiers.
Okay.
So that's 2 months. Okay.
Where you got listed Fund 23 or 39.
Sure.
Would you guys, Kurt?
Well, on the financial report, you got like Fund 23 or 39. You put those fund numbers.
Okay, so that brings us up to technology update. Evan?
Good evening. It's been a busy summer. We've been working on a lot of items. The big ones are phones. We were trying to get phones in every single room that people could be in every building. Additionally, we're trying to map those to enhance 911 zones. So the schools have different zones, first floor, second floor, things like that, so that our information is more accurate. And also using the phones as a PA system. So we're mapping that out and all that set. We hope to have that ready when school starts. We've begun asset tracking. Part of that was cataloging all the Chromebooks per building. So that is mostly complete. We're working on getting those Chromebooks repaired, getting some new Chromebooks ordered. We're also working on laptops, desktops. Many of them were eligible to be upgraded to Windows 10, more secure, a lot faster updates. So we're taking advantage of that. We've also taken on the website updates, made some updates to the directory, trying to keep everything up to date. Improved internet filtering, so when students come back, things are safer, ready for them. We also added offline redundant backups to our backup system. So we took a backup of the backup, and we're storing that offline, so it's what we call air gapped. Just in case we have an event where we need to go back to that system, we have that fail safe. So pretty low cost, they will be implemented, but it really helps. And then the last thing we've been working on is processing the videos. Subtitles are a bit of a challenge. We're still working on that. So I don't really have an update on it. We're still working on the last meeting. We'll be working on tonight's video as well. Any questions?
You hook the phones to the PA system, or how does that work?
We're going to turn the phones into a PA system, so we can use the speakers for a broadcast. And by putting a phone in every room, we hope to cover all of the areas.
So does that mean get rid of the walkie-talkie things?
That's up to the building administrators. We just want them to have a reliable backup.
How many Chromebooks do we have after inventory? Are we not including that?
We haven't put a full list together. It's over 3,000.
Okay.
And there are many of those that are going to be obsolete in coming years. And that's the important thing that we're mapping out is when you expect that additional cost as those become obsolete.
I noticed that we got a proposal in front of us for more Chromebooks.
Right.
And I'm assuming the reason we need more Chromebooks versus cases are we have the cases from the old Chromebooks, is that correct?
Partially, but also for the Chrome cards over at Compass. Many of the Chromebooks go right to the cards, so they don't necessarily need the cases.
Okay.
Have you ever looked at the Raspberry Pi
Absolutely.
solutions?
Yes. Yep.
I know those are much less expensive compared to the Chromebook. So.
Yeah, they have some reliability issues, but it's something that we'd love to see as part of an intern program or a robotics program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, newsletter. I think that's the newsletter.
So the one that I drafted actually had some great graphics and whatnot. This did not print as well. That's, when I sent it to Devin, he can manipulate so it looks better when it actually goes out versus what printed at my home printer. But this is the copy that you have in front of you. I just want everybody to take a look at it, make sure that it's what you had in mind before I submit it to Devin. And then I assume that we talked about where we're going to attach it to the board page or. The graphics just didn't print, so. I've already had one addition. They'll ask me to make an adjustment if we need us. there's anything else that you see or would like to see, let me know, because I'd like to get this together as soon as possible.
I'd like to see something in there that says that we haven't had any owner violations and we're not breaking any laws, which seems to be a common misconception.
Let me see what I can do.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I guess if anybody else, find any typos or anything?
Yeah, I don't see any typos, definitely, no.
All right, let's move on to discussion items. So we have a request for the RFP for technology purchase Chromebooks. It's in your packet here. Devin already really covered this, so I don't know if we can discuss it more than that.
Were we all purchased at the same time? Is that why we can rotate some out and some in?
Devin, you want to come up and answer the question?
So we purchase them in batches, basically,
Okay.
but, so the incoming seventh graders need approximately 200, and then there's a batch at Compass that's gonna go out of service date. And without getting all of the updates, they may not run the standardized testing software. So we have to make sure that we have updatable Chromebooks ready to go, especially at Compass.
How much are they about these?
It depends on the model. The ones that we were looking at are roughly $200. So that's where we're at right now. They're very durable. They have a really good reliability rate. The replacement parts are also cheap. Some of the models, their replacement parts are more expensive.
Is there any way maybe to get a class at the high school or something during flex time where students can repair these?
I think that's a great idea. Absolutely. Even the STEAM Center, potentially.
Right.
Awesome. Thanks, Devin.
Can we just get more approval for him to proceed with that, and we'll go out for bid, just to get record of what's going on.
I make a motion, we go off the bids.
Second.
Roll call?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right. Greg, the transformer testing protocol.
Correct, you've got that in front of you. We do own the transformer. It powers, I know I've never heard of owning one, but we do. It powers, brings power into all but the very north end of the middle school. So it's something that has to be replaced. Mike spent some time talking with a guy, I think Mr. O'Connell, who was also, and I met him too. You're looking at a little over $37,000 to replace that. The good news, the last one has been there since '62, and so they don't get replaced very often. But that is a cost that we'll have to account for our budget.
Is there a way to shift that back to consumers?
No, but that was what he asked. We both asked him that question, why we couldn't, and his answer was kind of ambiguous to me, but it's, apparently was put in there when the football field was built to step up more of the power for the lights, but we don't use those anymore. I don't know if it's like a life contract with that, but he said it wasn't really something they could do. We just have to buy it.
Do we still use those lights?
No, but we still need
Have a
that.
smaller one?
No, because we built onto the high school 3 times since those lights went up. So we need the extra power, plus with we talked about that too, with the requirement for all the technology we have now, we can't go backwards on electricity. We need all the juice we can get, because the technology is used in the classrooms, and just the fact the building's bigger. We have HVAC units, we have air conditioning stuff we never had before.
So there's 2 of them?
Transformers?
Yeah, for
Just-
that building?
Just the one.
Oh, just
Well,
the one.
on the north end, it comes off from a pole on the very north end. It's just a regular transformer on a pole, not the big brown transformer that's out there on, this one's on the southwest corner of the building, really closer to the football, for the old football field and track.
The north, one they're replacing.
That's on the southwest. The
It says
north,
replace north transformer.
Oh, for them, on their north end of their grid, that is located in our
Oh,
building.
okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
That's
yeah.
all right.
And this is just old age,
Yes.
it's not something we can look at insurance claim for or anything like that.
That I don't know. I mean, I don't think there'd be an insurance claim for it, it's just fair wear and tear, it's just shot. But the good news is the oil leak was tested for PCBs that were negative, so there's no hazmat or environmental cleanup. Just clean it up, it's gone. It's just regular, it's like hydraulic oil.
How long will it take them to,
Let's see, I think it's in here, yeah, they're going to have to shut the power down for a day. They had selected a date, I don't see it on here. It's before the kids come back to school, obviously, but yeah, there'll be a day when we'll have power shut down. The bad news is some of the people right around us will lose power for a short amount of time while they hook it up. But they aren't anticipating a widespread. The big shutdown will be in the school.
So if they're putting in a new one on the north, why do they have to do testing? Or they do testing after they put it in?
Yeah, no,
Okay,
it's system check.
okay.
The good news is this is supposed to be a little more efficient than the old one as well, so of course, we asked, are there any energy credits for that? No, but it'll just be more efficient.
get a 50-year warranty?
No,
Can't get rid of those.
that's right.
All right, any more questions on that? Okay. So let's go into, we don't have to. So 2019-20 building handbooks, discussions.
Right, for discussion. All the administrative team meets tomorrow. Our handbooks are all back to the attorney. Tomorrow we'll determine if we want to go through and do the edits on those tomorrow. Probably Wednesday with the building secretaries in there as well, so we can just clean them up, usually a couple hours. I mean, I don't remember doing it once or twice, but Terry always leads that, and it goes pretty quick. Because most of the edits are the same for every building, except that elementary kids don't drive to VOTEC and things like that, so it shouldn't take that long.
So then we'll be discussing it at the next board meeting.
Yes,
right?
on the
Yeah,
26th.
Well, we'll have to vote on that, because we need it before school starts, so.
We'll get a copy of that.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, I want a copy beforehand then.
All right.
Okay.
Is that?
Some electronic.
Yeah.
Yeah, just make it, yeah, I just get it.
As long as they got large font. Sorry.
All right, action item, district terminology. Last board meeting, we discussed changing facilitator back to teacher and learner back to student. We also discussed the building names, but pretty much decided to hold off until we can figure out the configuration of where
Right.
students are going to be. So can I get a motion to call teachers teachers and students students?
Support.
Can we need to revisit our taglines though, because it's uncompromising. It's not going to be student centered, is it?
Right.
So we're going to look at change.
Oh, is it not about the uncompromising
I
anyway?
don't like that.
All right, let's go with this one and then discuss the next one. All right, so I have a motion to change facilitator to teacher and learner to student. And I get a second from that?
I second
Okay.
it.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
And then
This is
Jen,
to Scott.
we'll discuss that at the next time.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, moving on.
Do you want to go ahead and consent and-
Well, we'll just do that first. NASB and then. Yep, so Donna?
Ready?
Yep.
Well, hello.
Welcome back.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Yeah, me too.
Seriously considered raining out there.
Well, there's a big one coming.
Is there?
Yeah.
How are you? Good.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So much better.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Want to try yours? We can do that. This one's good. We did. Okay, let me grab this and we'll give ours a try. Okay, well, we're just going to take a second to get that set up. So it looks like you have handouts in front of you, which is fantastic. So our plan for tonight is to go over the stakeholder input for both those face-to-face sessions and the online survey. And so that information is obviously context for you, because the next step after that is we're going to work on selection criteria. And so I think you have a draft of the selection criteria that we sent over today. And so my expectation is that you're going to tear it apart and put it back together. And make it your own. It's got to be something that we all believe in. So let's just talk, let me just set the context for the survey, then while they're getting that set up over there. And I'm totally happy if we have to do this the old-fashioned way, no problem there. So, you know, we ended up, the survey was supposed to close Friday, actually it stayed open, I actually closed it yesterday. And we did have a couple of folks that kind of jumped in on it late. I imagine that if I were you, I would be thinking that you wanted to see more responses to that survey. Here's my theory on this, is I think this kind of upheaval, you know, turmoil in the district has gone on long enough that maybe we could have pointed a little bit of apathy on that. Where folks are like, you know, I'm not so sure if I express my opinions, it doesn't matter, this has been going on for a long time. I could be all wet on that. That's one of the things I wondered as I looked at the numbers. The district did a nice job of keeping that information out there, easily accessible on the website. So that's, and especially reading through those narrative comments that people typed in, that would be one of the things I would wonder about. Because it's been, you know, a bit of a haul in that. So I suspect that's the case. I'm going to actually do that if you don't mind, just because so I'll trade you places. I've got that bomb voice, so it'll work well. No worries there. So we ended up with, there we go. So we ended up with about 235 responses. Now some of those were duplicates. And the system was set up to not accept duplicates from the same IP address. But I'm going to declare them as duplicates because they had the exact same spelling errors and spacing issues in them. So I think it had to do with that when we first launched it and there were those technology problems. I don't know if you remember that, Tim and you and I talked about that at length. I think it was just about them trying to make sure. So I took that into consideration when I did this. And all told, it was only about 5 that were affected from what I could tell. So I wouldn't lose sleep over it. But I do at least want to tell you that in case you kind of wondered about that. So I thought we had a pretty good cross-section of folks who responded to the survey. This first question is asking if they're a resident. And so, you know, and if so, how long they've been a resident. And so, you know, more than the majority, 80%, a little over that, were residents of the district, so that's positive when you add that. So if you look at that blue saying, do not live within the school district, only 13% don't live in the school district. The rest either did or would rather not say. We're always going to see some portion of folks that choose that would rather not say, and that's because they're just not sure if we're going to be able to disaggregate who said what. Every district I've ever done work in, we see that. So that's nothing to lose sleep over, that's just kind of a natural part of this. And that number is not higher, the percentage is not higher than I see in other districts either. So I would point that out if I saw that differently. So now we're asking about, if they work for the school district, how long? And so this is, and I reported this with the actual numbers so that you could see. So in this case, 153 of those responses, actually those respondents don't work for the district. Now why that's relevant is usually I see a higher proportion of staff responses as opposed to community responses. So you get a lot of community responses and fewer staff responses. Now I can't speak to why that is. I think that's something for you to think about why. It could be they were concerned about where the survey was going. It could be that they're, just have some anxiety about what happens next. I don't know. That said, there still is a more than adequate sampling of staff represented in the survey as well. In a couple of the slides, if you've looked through a little bit of what we sent you today, you'll see that I actually separate out what the staff says versus what the community says, because I thought that might be a question that you had. So in those specific questions, I'll talk you through where I disaggregated the data by stakeholder type. So this is just giving you the detail on which type of stakeholder, and they can check more than one. So for example, I could be a teacher in your district and also the mother of an elementary school student and a middle school student, right? And so in this case, just know that if you're a data person, it's not going to add up to that 235 because they could check more than one. But again, you're seeing a great representation of different stakeholder types represented in here. Even in the grandparent, guardian, other, you're seeing that coming at just under 10%. That's higher than a lot of other places that I see, so I thought that was pretty interesting. So good representation overall. Now here's a case of where I have unpacked the information in two different ways. So on the left side, what we see are those major themes that emerged from, I'm calling it non-staff, so anybody who doesn't work for the district. And then on the right side, we're seeing those folks who do work for the district and how they report it. So these are commonly called word clouds. They're not fancy, but what they let us do is communicate those big issues that emerged consistently pretty quickly to you. The larger that a word appears in the word cloud, the more often that theme came up. Now it might not have been that exact word. So for example, if I had 30 responses that said good teachers and 20 responses that said great teachers, I might have put them together so they just said great teachers because they were essentially saying the same thing. So just that you understand that I'm doing some combination when I'm doing the analysis. So when you take a look at these two word clouds, both the non-staff and the staff, this question was question 4 on the survey. So it was, tell us about the strengths of Tecumseh Public Schools as you see it. And so, obviously, on both sides of the coin, lots of support for your teaching staff, for sure. As we unpack kind of the non-staff side, you see a lot of additional things that jumped out as far as some of the programs that you're offering. AP courses, STEAM, music, robotics, had a lot of positive comments in there about administrators. As you look at this, does anything jump out at you that you have a question on? Or you just kind of wonder, when all those words come together, sometimes you just might see something and be like, what's the big idea there? Lots of positive, just on some of the kind of good things that happen for sure. When we look at the staff side then, again, lots of support on the staff side, not just for excellent teachers, but support staff were clearly mentioned. Administrators were clearly mentioned, but I want to emphasize in both cases, both non-staff and staff talked about what a great community this is. In two contexts, both what a great place this is to live and also how supportive the community is of what's going on in the school system itself and how engaged they are. So, both staff and non-staff did talk about that at length. That's certainly some of the things that I've heard from candidates that have already looked at the posting, who've come and if they weren't familiar with Tecumseh and driven through, that's a huge asset that you have. It's just kind of a small town feel, but with close proximity. So other things on the staff side is the staff believing really quite strongly on whatever side of the issue they're on, because there's a significant divide on your staff. as far as how they feel about what's going on here. There's no doubt about that. It comes up in the next question. But regardless of which side they're on of things, they do feel like the district really is student-focused and that teachers and administrators here really are keeping the best interests of students at heart when they're leading, implementing, making decisions. So that's certainly a positive. I heard a little bit more on the arts program from staff than I did from parents. I don't think that's scientific. I think it just depends on what they've had exposure to, either firsthand or via communications. So I didn't see any huge disparities on the strength side. What I found to be more interesting is when we, I don't keep my hands is in the next question, right? Which is, what are the challenges? So hopefully you can see this okay. It looks like it's washing, the screen's washing out a little bit. So again, non-staff is on the left side and staff is on the right side. And so this is a term I put different kinds of comments in, which is this quality education for students. And I want to explain. So whenever I saw a comment that was just, I feel like basically there's been so much turmoil that I'm not so sure we're really doing what's in the best interest of kids. Like, what is the quality of the education at this point, given what's transpired here? That's the bucket I put in. I put it in. And so it's not so much that each of those concerns were the same, right? It was often unique to their child or what they may have heard anecdotally. But that's the major theme that it is related to. Lots of comments on this idea of there being a lack of stability, in the district overall, as far as the changing of programs, the changing of leaders, that has caused serious concerns. In both cases, I mean, you see some common points, but concerns about, we've talked about this together quite a bit in this room, is kind of what's going on with the school board. We definitely saw that on both sides. Smaller sampling of staff, but a greater proportion of staff concerned about board decision-making than as far as the proportion of public who mentioned that, I would say, remembering that there's more comments from the public in general than from the staff. So other kind of things that are major things that I would say are pretty consistent in both of them are things like trust, right? Like how do we build trust, in the district as a whole moving forward? And overarching, how do you enact the divide, right? So it sounds to me as an outsider, having the conversations and analyzing the feedback, is that this change, while it had its own repercussions in the community, had serious and deep repercussions on staff and staff teams themselves. So there are some folks who are sort of like, no, this was working, we just needed more time, now we're throwing everything out. And some folks who are like, gosh darn, that was awful and it needed to go. And they're still in the trenches, it looks like, based on the comments that I saw. And so I think that has very serious implications for the selection criteria specifically. Because whoever your next superintendent is, they darn sure better be a uniter, because you can't afford any more dividers, right? And so that has to be a paramount concern when we look at their past experience, what their track record is, not just what they say they can do, but evidence of their having had success in the past at bringing groups together. So let's continue to look at these two. Student enrollment, a big issue. Specifically, on the left side, it's articulated as enrollment. On this side, the staff side, it's articulated as loss of students. The size difference, as far as how often it was mentioned, is probably more related to staff being acutely aware of every time you lose a student, you're losing that foundation allowance. Parents probably have a more general idea of that, right, than the specific dollars, right? Because we like to make sure school financing is as complicated as possible in Michigan so that no one can understand it. So there's a great concern about that. Now, I think that's something that to think about, again, I mean, all of this is something to think about as we think about who your next superintendent's going to be. But it does make one think that public relations, communications, marketing, right? Because turning the perception is going to be critically important. I mean, the reality certainly has its own work that has to be done, but managing those perceptions is important as well. Not everybody who's a superintendent thinks of themselves as a marketer. And so that is, I think, a distinguishing difference and something that Unless you feel like that is not really an issue here. I mean, part of it is, do you actually have a grave concern regarding loss of students? Or is it just a perception? In either case, both of those things will need to be managed. Do you have questions about what we're seeing up here on either of these? Any words that I haven't talked about that you wonder what they mean, why they're there? Probably a lot of what you expected based on what you talked to me about previously. Finances came up also just outside of it, related to enrollment, but also, you know what surprised me that didn't come up on here? So I don't do a deep dive on infusing the face-to-face conversations into this, because most of those people fill out the survey, I mean, to a person. Most folks who come and meet with us face-to-face have either already filled out the survey or they're about to when they leave because of the confidential aspect of the survey. Face-to-face, I heard about your facilities. Online, not so much. And so, while there is certainly a race for quality facilities as far as attracting and retaining students, I mean, that's a real thing in Michigan, right? I think that while you have some great facilities, right, that you can work on, maybe the positive aspect of that is being lost in, right, some of this other stuff that has transpired. Because I was surprised to not see that come through. There was a couple comments, but not enough to make the list, so to speak. All right, so now we're talking more just about those specifics that we're expecting to unpack as far as selection criteria. So this question 6 is just minimum level of education that the board should consider. What we're seeing here is, you see that number reported, master's plus administrative certificate. I don't think there's any surprise there. We talked about the fact that you weren't interested in hiring somebody who's non-certificated based upon your past experience. So don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that. Although I will say if we look at the next one, which is a doctorate, so that could be a PhD or an EDD, and you had 40 people say, hey, I think it's really important that this, the person that you hire have that, I would not describe that as an overwhelming support for that. So it sounds to me like it's much more about knowledge, skills, and experience, not necessarily about those added letters after the individual's name. You may feel differently for other reasons, but that's certainly what the survey would tell us. So now we're talking about past experience. So what specifically kinds of experiences has this individual had? So this is one of those questions where it's a big deal in what happens. The reading must be starting. Is that what we're hearing? Okay. And so first of all, just looking at this, so I sorted it so that those with the highest responses are at the top. So first, let's just talk about the second, third, and fourth. So teacher, building principal, and assistant superintendent. So right out of the gate, what I'm going to say is you are not looking for a non-traditional candidate. You're going to be looking for somebody who is well steeped in education, well versed in it, knows the issues, has experience in the classroom. That seems really important. The surprise in this is that having experience in another district as a superintendent has the most votes in this case, the most responses. And so I don't know that I got that from the face-to-face, but it sure came through loud and clear. Those are the actual response numbers that are identified up there. And so I know we had had that conversation previously. When you had built out your salary range, that was something that you took into serious consideration so that the vacancy would be attractive to experienced soups, but I think that's pretty telling that your stakeholders think that that is important. So we would want to be mindful of that. Any questions about anything on these last couple of slides that we just went over? Every time I come here, you guys are like,
Okay,
yeah,
I got it.
Okay, good.
I'm breaking the ice here. So, 146 people said they prefer the person be a superintendent in another district. How many of that is people that work for the district versus don't?
So what I do is I originally filter by work and don't. I only do the separate data if it is materially different. So it tracked consistent in both. So I can't give you the exact number, but I will tell you.
But it was similar.
It was similar, or I would have shown you separate charts. Right? So it was very consistent, and that was a good question. So now, so there's a joke, and I think we might have talked about this a little bit. So there's kind of a challenge when you're looking for a superintendent, because by the time everybody makes their long list of what we're looking for, it's kind of like you're looking for Superman or Superwoman who can do every single thing and jump small buildings and see what we can get. You're really not going to get that, right? So there's always an opportunity cost. There's choices that have to be made. So the usefulness of some of this information is that we actually are breaking it down so you can see what was most important compared to other things. And so when we talk about specific areas of expertise, clearly curriculum, right, is right at the top of that list. It's probably not a surprise to you all, but something to think about. Number 2 then is budget development, followed shortly behind public relations, human resource management, and contract labor negotiations. That makes perfect sense when I think about the conversations I had and all those comments that I read. And I imagine that it does to you when you think about kind of the current state of things. I will say, and I already mentioned that kind of rift in your staff, but there was also a lot of contradiction in what I heard even among instructional staff here. And so, and even among instructional staff and in my separate conversation with the union. So there certainly is a lot of different perspective here. And so it's going to take what I would describe as a fair level of skill and experience to be able to navigate and lead through that. Because usually there just isn't that great a disparity when it comes to what's core, important opinion and perspective in instructional staff. Usually there's much more consistency in that. So as a leader, they're going to have to be able to appeal to those different audiences even within the instructional staff that you have here, right? Because they have to have credibility to lead those folks and bring them together. So that is sort of, I think, an interesting issue to have to work through. Those will be important questions for us to ask in the interviewing phase and also in the reference checking phase for sure. So question 9 is, almost overly simplistic, although it does give you as a board a quick assessment of like what's most important. So most people would be expected to employ different leadership styles depending on what's happening. This question actually lays that out. In the full question, it says like, hey, people are going to change between different leadership styles depending on the situation they're in, but what would you think is the primary style that's important here? No big surprise, and in this case it's collaborative. And so while we probably do that walking into this conversation, it certainly affirms that that's going to be paramount. We will expect when we're interviewing folks to also hear about how they employ different leadership styles and when they do that, right? There's a time for a more autocratic decision-making style. There's a time for a more collaborative decision-making style. And what you want to be able to discern is an individual's ability to deploy those styles appropriately in the context of the situation. So now we're talking about experiences and skill areas. And again, this is about what rose to the top. So if you saw this whole list, it's as long as your arm. So I've only put on the slide those ones that received the greatest amount of interest, because again, you have to focus on what's most important, because you're not necessarily going to get everything. And so this first one, exceedingly responsive, follows through and follows up. So this is about keeping those channels of communication open. If your leader says they're going to do something, they must do that. That has to do with integrity. So when people don't do what they say they're going to do, they lose their credibility with individuals, whether we're talking about your citizens, your stakeholders, or your staff as well. And so it's interesting that that is the most important. I don't know what's happened here to make that paramount, but that's the biggest issue that was cited, right? Recognizes, values, and affirms staff members. This is not a surprise. I think this is directly related to the fact that there is an issue with staff morale. There's no doubt about that. There's concern about kind of what happens next as you lose staff. How will you attract and retain staff? And so somebody who can be a builder, right, encourage the heart, I think is going to be important. So now we're seeing that curriculum, knowledge, and deployment come up as important. That's been a consistent theme in this. Ability to develop and direct an effective management team. So this is specifically about the admin team and central office, right? So your building level administrators, your central office administrators, that's coming up as very important. Sounds like there's been some turnover in those positions in the last 3 or 4 years. Is that a true story, or am I making that up? Yep. Okay, so that's probably why we're seeing that. Visibility and accessibility in the district, so people want to be able to talk to this person, they want this person to be available. Now, we did talk at length, so in Michigan, you cannot compel residency, right? So we would have to follow the same laws that like fire and police do, which is as close as you can come to compelling residency, is to say that you expect this individual to live within 20 miles of the perimeter of the school district. It's something that we talk about during the time that we're establishing selection criteria, because if you expect that, then we need to make it clear at the beginning. They wouldn't move here tomorrow. You would actually build into the contract something like a 2 or 3 year window for them to relocate to the district, and there would usually be some kind of moving cost that would be built into the contract. Here's why I'm bringing that up right now. When we talk face-to-face to your stakeholders and asked that question, they were like, meh, we don't care so much if they live here specifically, but gosh darn it, they better be invested in Tecumseh and they better be at activities. So that did come through loud and clear. So what gets weird for you is you can start to kind of think about if they live an hour away, how accessible are they going to be, how visible are they going to be. If they live, 3 hours away, but they take up a apartment here Monday through Friday, is that going to be acceptable to folks in Tecumseh? I'm not bringing these things up to tell you it should be one thing or the other, but why I'm bringing it up is that if you think it's important that the person within 2 or 3 years move within 20 miles of the perimeter of the school district, or they're not going to be well received by your community, then we have to stipulate that, even in the initial posting, so that people don't have different expectations and end up that becomes a derailer for their success. So that'll be something that we definitely have to talk about. We see superintendents who are able to maintain visibility and accessibility without living in a community all the time. It really has to do with the community's perceptions about the fact that they don't live there. Sometimes it's no big deal at all. They'll say, oh, that person just got the job as a superintendent. They have a sophomore in high school. We know that they're going to move after that their child graduates and it's not a big deal. Sometimes it'll be the biggest deal in the world. You have to figure out how relevant that is here. This last one demonstrates a keen ability to think outside the box and develop creative solutions to complicated problems. We put the easy term on this as kind of like resourcefulness, and much of that has to do with two things. First of all, the interpersonal complexity that's going on here, right? Somebody's going to be able to have to approach that creatively, but also just some of the financial pieces that people are worried about related to enrollment. I'm guessing, based on the comments, that's why that came up as high as it did. So now we're just talking and looking at personal characteristics. This is, Greg and I talked about this on the way down. This is one of the reasons why superintendent search is a public process, because this is a case of, when you look at a superintendent, you're looking at the whole package. So where in other jobs, we might not do, other positions, we might not do such a deep dive into things like character. But in the case of the superintendent, it definitely matters because of the leadership role that they play in the community. So here we're seeing those kind of high-ranking ones. Again, it's a long list. Honest and ethical comes out at the top. Problem solving comes out as number 2. I'm sure that's not a surprise. But strong listener, even in comments, that came up a lot. So not only did they choose this as an option, but they talked so much about really wanting to be heard. And when I split the data apart, non-staff felt that as well as staff. And so that I think is going to be important for us to, when we're doing background and experience checks on these folks, to see, so how, it's one thing to be kind of a great showman and a great communicator, but they really have to be able to listen. So I think we're going to have to dig deep on questions and research on that. Transparency, collaboration, and being the second to last, this idea of being goal-oriented. So that is interesting, because it seems to me one of the first things that's going to have to happen here, once you have identified your new superintendent and your new superintendent has begun, is you're going to have to come to terms with what exactly is it that you're trying to accomplish here, so that everybody can be on the same page and set some goals for your new superintendent so they know where the target is. So that will be critical. Okay, so I generally describe this as the most important question to the superintendent search. So So the question is, in choosing the next superintendent, which path or strategy below do you think the Board of Education should take? And they can only choose one answer in this question. So let me just unpack this. So the 53.55% say find a candidate with the same basic educational management philosophy as the current, but be willing to make some necessary changes. That's pretty much what that whole line says, okay? So then we look at the yellow, which is 32.23%, and it says find a very different kind of candidate, one who is ready to take the district in a significantly different direction. So that, the yellow is what I would call just a flat-out change agent. Like they are coming in and making radical change. It's interesting that that didn't outweigh this more moderate approach, right, the 53%. And again, when I disaggregated it for staff and non-staff, it really was pretty consistent. That surprised me. I didn't expect to see that. And then the 14.22% is find a candidate who will stay the course, continue the good work of the current administration. So not a surprise that that only hit roughly, just under 15%, because I think everybody feels like there's some change that's necessary. Where the differences are is what are those changes, right? So if you were thinking that your community and your staff is looking for a flat-out change agent, I would say that this question tells us no, it's probably a little bit more moderate than that. It's building a bridge between those two worlds of, for lack of better descriptors, the more traditional approach and the more progressive approach. I mean, that's certainly what this looks like to me. What also is somewhat confounding is that when I disaggregate this, I can disaggregate the comments as well. The comments were virtually the same, regardless of what option they chose, which is probably just more to do with frustration about the upheaval. Sometimes those comments are really helpful, and I can kind of package them to help you analyze this and process it. That in this case, it just didn't lend itself to that. There was a lot more of what we've already seen in the strengths and the challenges that was covered as far as those big themes. So, any questions about that?
So with this last question, I found it a little bit confusing to answer this because there's been first of all, there's been a lot of change. And when looking at these answers, you have to figure out, am I talking about what we were 3 years ago? Am I talking about what we were 2 years ago? Or am I talking about what we are as we stand right now, which has changed since the end of this past school year? So based on the comments that you got from this, what action are they looking for? Is it more of a traditional education with PBL, or is it more of, larger, more experimental change, like we had before? I mean, what does this tell you in the comments?
So let me say that I think the lens that most people answered this question and even looked at the survey from was looking at in the fullness of PBL right before the transition, okay, right before the changeover. I think that was the context. Certainly as I looked at the comparatives, that's what it looked like, except for one thing. And I'm not gonna act like I have every transition that you've done memorized. And so I've said before, I might not get this just right, but I think I have the spirit of it. Except in the case where you employed an administrator who didn't have experience in education. Clearly, that was a hot button issue for folks. So those comments that were centered around that were very clear. They were frustrated around that. But by and large, the rest of it seemed much more focused on that paramount change, the big change, as opposed to some of the things that have unfolded thereafter. It's almost like they're viewing all that stuff thereafter as the turmoil, the chaos, the drama, upheaval. Those were some of the words that I saw that described that in the feedback. So, you're trying to get a pulse now with your question on, hey, where do you think they are? So first of all, I don't know that this sample is big enough, 230 responses for you to set your sail by, right? I think there are more conversations that need to happen once your new leader is in place. Because even Greg and I having spent time in the district and having had conversations, we didn't have huge representation at the meetings. I just don't think there's trust yet. So you're going to be able to get a lot better information once you have your permanent superintendent in place and that individual engenders trust. Clearly there is a lot of trust, for granted. I mean, that was very clear in some of the commentary. But even with as many positive comments as there is about that, one of those things that we ask is, on there, like, one of the things that they rank is prior familiarization with the district. That didn't make it on these screens because the responses was like 2.35. So I'm calling it off the top of my head, but I think I'm pretty close. And so what that tells us as search consultants is, overall, they're not looking for somebody who's currently playing on the home team. They're looking for a fresh perspective based on what's happened. I don't know all the players here. That's not my assessment of somebody's competency for the job. I want to be very clear on that. But there seems to be a will for a fresh perspective that came through loud and clear. For you to get the information that you're looking for, John, if I were to call it as I saw it just in the sampling, I would say that there was a lot of pride associated with Tecumseh Public Schools in trying new things and having high expectations for your students. There's a lot of pride associated with that, especially when you're in this environment where you have some pretty big players in close proximity to you, whether we're talking about kind of what Ann Arbor's doing, what Dexter's doing, you get the idea. There's a lot of pride associated with that, and there is a desire to be able to be proud again. Like, hey, we are doing good things here, but maybe with a more moderate approach, if that makes sense.
Could we really be looking for somebody based on that new area that would have the basic educational management or management philosophy with bring a different style? That was my understanding of what's going wrong. Is the ideas weren't bad; it was how they were approached.
The implementation. I think that is certainly one way to approach it.
And I think we got that from the survey that we did earlier this year. The results were similar.
In the comments that were specific to the board, so let me just, in case I get questions from the audience, it's just easier for me to just say it like this now. So the survey belongs to MASB, okay? And so I choose to do the analysis.
Can you have a microphone?
Oh. You can't hear me, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So, thank you. You didn't.
We don't need it, we have it.
Right, and mostly people will say that about me for sure. So MASB owns the survey data, and I choose to do the analysis and report it to you because, and not give you all those individual comments because I've just seen them used the wrong way, quite candidly, to not build a district and instead tear it down. So that's my practice. I'm not subject to FOIA the way you are, quite candidly. And so, but at the same time, I think it's important that I be straightforward, right, about what was in there. So I think when we think about the transition that the district is undergoing, and I think about the comments that I saw both from staff and non-staff related to the board, there are two pretty consistent themes that emerge, some of which we've already talked about. So the one that we've already talked about is this idea of micromanagement. Like, is the board just so far in the minutia that they're not going to be able to pull back when the permanent superintendent is in place? I'm not going to go on about that now because we talked about it a long time the last time we got together. But the second one is this idea of there's a level of fear that was communicated that you feel like you've been elected, to react to that, to what happened, and that you're so focused on continuing to react to that that you're not thinking on your own now, given the current context of the situation. I'm not saying that's true, but I'm just saying again and again, I saw it in there, we saw in there, people saying the board feels like they have to keep their campaign promises to such an extent that they're not in the current circumstance, right? They're just beholden to that. Now, you live here. You have to determine at what point what you campaigned on versus where things are now, and when you need to weigh those differently. But those were pretty consistent concerns. And I bring them up now only to say, again, they're related to that. What is the direction the district is going in, and kind of what is the pulse of folks? When I disaggregated the data, again, staff and non-staff, those same concerns were voiced as far as they don't have to be held to what their campaign promises were. They need to be more flexible than that. It's your constituency. I imagine you have lots of conversations all the time, so I was going to go on more than that. Fair enough? There.
Well, the micromanaging, that always cracks me up because that's the farthest thing that we've done here. And I think Greg could probably you know. I don't, are you guys going there every day in my So,
I have a call.
You know, if I can clear something up, okay, so when I first came here, remember I was gonna be the Compass principal, that was what I thought I was gonna be, and then they asked me to take this job, and I got plopped down the middle of this and haven't been gone 4 years and doing nothing with academics the last 2, just as an athletic director, I was lost. I mean, the faces had changed a lot, the administrative team had changed considerably. I didn't know where to start from. I'm like, where's the clutch, right, when I jump in? So I did refer back to Tim a lot at the beginning. I mean, he was the one who said we could use you. He was the primary spokesperson for the board. I mean, I had to have someplace as a reference. So if that created a illusion that he was micromanaging, that was me going to him more than him coming to me. Because I mean.
That misinformation started before that, Greg, but,
Okay.
but do thank you for the.
I would honestly tell you, after I came back from Europe and started here again on the 7th of June, I would call him some things and he'd say, you're the superintendent, you get to make these choices. Well, I've never been a superintendent before, so I'm not really used to this. I'm used to having somebody to report to. It's to keep, and then lately my conversations have increased them again, because before I make some decisions, I'll say, listen, I'm not going to be here but another month. How do you feel about this? Because the handoff's going to go to somebody else. And he, especially in the summer, and I could deal more with the administrators because they'll be back. But there had to be somebody that I could tell, here's what the plan is, here's what I think is going to happen going forward. If that, again, created any illusion of micromanaging, that was more me reporting to somebody, because I'm just here for, 120 days.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, because we've talked about this, and we didn't talk about this, right? My approach to this, my guidance to you in this is that, look, you're going to hire a permanent superintendent. Notice I keep using that word, permanent. Because that's what the objective here is, right? We want to shoot for 5 to 7 years. And you're going to make that decision, and once you make that decision, that person starts. You're going to come together around what is their role and what is your role. And so I think that's the important thing to focus on, right? Is in your case, you're saying, hey, our roles were a certain way given the circumstances, and that may or may not have been misinterpreted. But that's how, no matter what district I'm in, my advice is that that's how you begin the relationship, because you want to establish expectations. And so I think it's going to be very pertinent here. It is done in a public meeting, right? And so people will be able to see you do that, and you will hold one another to that as you move forward in it. So that's not my paramount concern at this point. Honestly, I trust what you're telling me, and I also trust when you told me that you're tired and that you're ready to not feel the awesome responsibility that you felt through this. So, okay. So unless you have additional questions about this survey, we're going to shift gears now and take a look at that draft selection criteria. So I'm going to give you a minute to shift gears, and I'm going to ask if you will go back to the driver's chair, because we'll make these live if you're game. Yep. Did you take more than one copy, Greg? Sorry. That's okay. They're all set. Because you other things you have. I like them. So do you two? So this was one between you.
Yep.
So this will be a case of we're hearing each other's important. So. Yeah. Okay, I need to be able to see this.
We turn a bit of podium on you.
No. I think my voice is going to be less important in this, and we'll want to hear yours. So I think it'll work fine without it. But let's just talk about how we're going to do this. So Greg has agreed to drive, and let's just talk first about what's the purpose of this document. You'll remember that when we came together before, we talked about this. This is the lens by which we will evaluate everybody who applies for the position. And so in this, there's some surrender that takes place, right? Because you're not all going to get everything you want, but what you need to do is come to agreement on what you as a single board, right, are going to be looking for. So not only does it become important to you, as you're looking at candidates. It's critical for us as we're talking to prospective candidates. So I already have 5 or 6 folks that are waiting for me to call them after this is done, so that we can talk about, what is the strength of their candidacy. That's very, very normal, so that's all good news, nothing bad about that. But it's important for us too. A good example of that is, how critical is it that this individual have prior experience as a superintendent? Because that's going to have some impact on who's going to apply. Now, before you think about this in terms of absolutes, I want to tell you that the human ego plays a beautiful role in superintendent search. So even though somebody might not be an exact fit for this, it doesn't mean that they will not apply. They will still apply even though they may look at it and say, well, I got 2/3, I'm in, right? Like, I mean a lot, and that's not a bad thing, that actually serves you well. But sometimes as we talk through this, it makes a board nervous because you just don't want to close too many doors. So I want to tell you that you need to close the doors that are big definers, but don't worry too much about others. When we're missing something that's a huge issue and it just must be added, you need to tell us. How I like to do it is you take a minute, read through the whole document, and then we're going to walk through it one section at a time to see what needs to be changed. We're going to deal with the first paragraph last.
It's a trick.
Otherwise, we're going to have no fun.
Some of these seem like the same thing.
I know, it does start to. That's why we'll take it one at a time. So remember when we got together last time and I said between now and then I want you thinking a lot about what's critically important to you? And so before we start to unpack this, anything that came to you, you said, hey, I want to make sure that we're talking about this, take a minute and just jot it in the corner so that you don't forget to bring it up as we're working through this. Okay. So let's just start with that vision section. Is there anything that you think is missing? Is there anything that you think needs to be revised? Like the wording just doesn't work for you, you don't think it quite captures Tecumseh?
I think that the vision should include not only the schools but the community. And although it's not necessarily our responsibility to heal the community, I think that the superintendent will have a role in healing the community. So they need to be aware of that as a secondary target. The turmoil that we have in this community right now is because of the schools, so their behavior and actions are going to be a direct result of how that process changes.
That's pretty much the second one.
I'd add one word in all three communicate. You can have all these as nice, but it's got to be communicated.
Okay, so communicating is going to come up later on, a little farther down the page. Let's tackle this issue of community. So John, here's a question I have for you on that. So if the second bullet is changed to say, can work with the board and instead of stakeholders, it could be community.
That is
I think
stakeholders,
that,
stakeholders.
But stakeholders, I don't think everybody thinks of stakeholders as
Oh, okay.
people outside of the school. You know, like, I think people look at stakeholders as either parents or teachers or administrators. I don't think that they necessarily look at stakeholders.
Yeah, they have a
as
stake, well,
have something outside of direct contact with the school. So I think, you know, something that expands that more to the community or everyone makes more sense. At least, I mean, that's how I see it.
Is everybody okay with that being changed? Greg, don't be shy, if you can help us with a suggestion either.
And if more people think stakeholders is,
I don't think everybody's fine.
okay.
I don't know if that solves your overall concern about unity, so I'm gonna kind of park that as we go through the rest of it to see if there's something that we wanna do. If there's something that we may touch on later, but if not, we'll circle back to it. Anything else in this vision section?
I thought we were doing that last.
No, we're doing the paragraph at the top last.
Oh,
But we don't really talk about anything about students. And, you know, my thing is that Tecumseh Public Schools needs to make sure when students leave here, they're prepared for the world.
well, that's pretty much the last one. Can create process and environment to inspire others. We just tweak
That's
that.
our long-term vision right now.
I'm talking about students themselves.
We're looking for more outcome.
Yeah. So let's
Well, part
talk.
of your long-term vision might be increasing scores or, have be data-driven and, try this and see how it works. And if it's great, then you do it everywhere, but.
I'm going to suggest, Tim, that because one of the things that as I looked at your website, it looked like some stuff was kind of from before and some stuff was more current, like it was kind of iterative. I saw different things on there. And so what I'm going to suggest that we do to get that kind of language that you're after as far as anticipated outcomes for students, I'm going to suggest that we just make a note. We're not going to refine the first paragraph, but maybe we get that student focus. What is the outcomes that we're creating for students? We get that in the opening paragraph. So I'm going to park it there, but we'll come back to it at the end. Because then we'll work through the rest of it and see if we're here. Okay. All right, so let's move into the professional experience section with the understanding that if we need to step backwards, we can. So the first one that I'm suggesting is just flat out that it's K-12 teaching experiences are required. That's what this means listed this way, okay? The same thing with that building level administrative experience. So if we put it like this, we're saying it's a requirement. On that third line, you see right now, I have prior superintendent experience preferred. So that's softer language. And so my question to you is that what that should be, or should that be a requirement?
I agree with preferred.
I do, but I think we can all, or at least in my vision, I don't think I would be comfortable bringing someone in that didn't have prior experience.
In our situation, I
So I think it's mandatory. But there's always that, needle in a haystack where this person shows up and they don't have prior superintendent experience, but they're amazing. So I don't want to deter that person, but I think that at
That's
least
why I
in
think
my,
preferred kind of covers it.
Right.
yeah,
So why don't we do strongly preferred?
yes.
And is that a happy medium for everybody?
Sure.
Okay.
Unless they're a superstar, I personally would not vote for someone that doesn't have prior experience.
You add on that, either prior experience as a superintendent or at least an assistant superintendent.
So that is something that's not on here, it's just kind of prior central office experience. And so in the survey, that did come up high. And so we could add that. We don't generally view those as interchangeable. We usually view those as pretty separate experiences.
Like I said, given our current situation, I would prefer to have somebody who's been superintendent before.
So we'll do
But in my previous experience, we put in an assistant superintendent who was great. So, there are people that
There are, absolutely, I would agree. Okay, but we'll leave it as is. So here we have this master's degree plus admin cert. No question about that. Okay. So now take a look at the rest of those bullets. And again, this is professional experience. So these are things that we should be able to see pretty clear evidence of.
So should prior experience implementing building grade level changes, or reconfiguration, should that be strongly preferred as well? You're
So
kind of
too-
making a statement that somebody may be great, but their buildings might have never changed.
Right.
Yeah, not enough about that one.
Or maybe it doesn't need to be there at all.
No, I don't think it is.
You would eliminate it? Are we all comfortable striking that?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we hit on this, but the biggest thing that I think we need, based on the information that you brought to us tonight, what we've seen in the surveys, and just what we know from our experience, is that we have to bring in a team builder. I mean, the divide that we have internally has got to be managed by someone who's going to come in and help bring those people together versus continuing to keep them separate or allow that. Then they're going to have to figure out how to do that. But I think that if we can clean up the divide that we have internally, that's going to flow out to everyone else.
That's the personnel.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I was gonna point that out, so.
But I think that, I mean, I would prefer to see somebody who has some type of experience with team building, or at least, management.
I think if you found someone with prior superintendent experience, you're gonna have that. You gotta be they've been a superintendent, they gotta have.
Even an administrator would have team experience, team building
And that's,
experience.
I guess I just want to emphasize that piece of it. Even if they were a building principal, if they were building, strong teams within their buildings.
So I think that what we should probably think about doing is, this bullet that's collaborative work with staff for positive change. I think we could look at a revision in that kind of emphasizes that. Positive change in unity. Yeah, maybe work.
Doesn't collaborative kind of lead, I mean, that word alone means you're working together.
How about for positive change and unity of purpose? Greg, do you have any ideas on this one?
Unity of purpose works better.
And the other possibility of this is also expanding the ad staff on this, like maybe more community in this one as well. I don't know. You tell me. Staff and community for shared purpose. Collaborating with staff and community
Yes.
for a shared purpose.
We've also got that, I mean, I know we're coming back to it, but in that opening
Yeah.
sentence as well, is saying almost the exact same.
Yeah, that's true. Tell me how you're feeling, guys. Just about this.
I just know that was my number two,
Yeah, big deal.
big deal when I started going through the traits that I'd be looking for.
So I have
What was that?
Team building. My number one,
Isn't that kind of track record of success and improving?
well, that could be a lot of things.
So down in the interpersonal, John, down in the interpersonal section, I put this, able to bring together groups and individuals with disparate opinions towards a common cause.
Yeah, I started that, thought it should be number one.
Okay. So I think that hits some of that for you then.
It does.
Okay,
It does.
all right, so just check. So
I
we're
just, but I was just looking for it in the professional experience that they had actually done that. But I think these guys hit it on the head. If they're a prior superintendent, more than likely they had to,
yeah.
bring this together.
So does the board trust me to make a revision to that kind of tomorrow? And I think we have on the office, to just kind of get that right for what we extract. And I will tinker that a bit. But still get the spirit of what's there. Any other changes or feedback in this professional experience section?
Are we limiting ourselves to some, I mean, my K-12 teaching experience, there's some administrators who don't have, I mean, I think we should maybe being, or fooled people by putting some of this down, and then people just won't apply?
Taking those preferred,
Yeah.
They'll
I
apply.
agree there.
So what I have seen in that is that they will apply,
Okay.
even if there's no distinguishing. What becomes challenging for you is following through on what you said.
Right.
And so why I'm pointing that out is, that was a pretty resounding factor to say, part of it just has to do with an individual having credibility in education if they haven't actually taught in K-12 classroom.
I think that that would be a huge, I don't know if our teachers would be happy about.
Oh, we do know that. No, we know they wouldn't be.
Yeah.
That was very clear.
I know they wouldn't be. We've heard that over and over again, and that was one of the biggest criticisms about.
Aren't most people, haven't most applicants have experience in teaching?
Most traditional superintendent applicants, that's true. Occasionally, there's one that came into education kind of later in life. So maybe they served in law enforcement, or they were in higher ed, and they came down to educate, to K-12 education. The thing is, they'll still apply if they're interested in the job. What the board has to do then is weigh that against, because there'll be other things that people don't have. So you end up weighing what's more important here, that the individual have K-12 classroom experience, or that the person has prior experience.
Like you were saying, people will apply, even if they don't have every quality.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we see specific to the teaching issue is often they don't even teaching on a resume anymore. For a superintendent, it's like, no, we need you to put it on there. It's kind of a big deal. So even if it was 25 years ago, we need you to put it on your resume. So sometimes we're making phone calls to get that information because it's not on there. So no, they will definitely apply. It'll just be about your decision as far as its weight and relevance and decision making.
I'm not on the board, do I get to speak on this or no?
I think you certainly can share your perspective as a board as they would like to hear it.
Okay, the strongly preferred for prior superintendent experience, I think take the word strongly out of there, because a lot of those other things you're gonna measure up there, knowledgeable of education, research, and its practical application. Okay, that probably applies somebody who's got a superintendent, but it talks about collaborative work with staff or positive change, improving student learning and outcomes. If you're coming from a bigger district, that's probably not what a superintendent's gonna measure. It's him or her getting the right people in the buildings to do that. Those people in the buildings who work closely with their teachers bring those changes more than the superintendent, in my opinion. And if those people exist, and if I'm worried that just by putting the word strongly in there, some people are gonna say, I don't have a chance, and they don't throw their name in the ring. But especially somebody who's been a superintendent for 7 or 8 years somewhere else, they were a building principal 7 or 8 years before that, they're pretty removed from the classroom. And not, it's no fault of their own, it's just the nature of it. I mean, yeah, they might chart some way, but usually you're looking at budget, trying to stay up with state curriculum, that kind of stuff. You're just a little bit removed from that. I think you're more dynamic leaders that you can measure those other bullets from come at a lower level than superintendent, unless it's from a smaller district, maybe.
Well,
I'm okay with leaving it like you originally had it and just maybe, you know.
The only reason I say that, Donna, I mean, the more hats we get in the ring and you have a chance to sort through them, I think that's a better way to vet them than having somebody say, that is what they want. Those people do exist. I mean, you see coordinators in the NFL don't become a head coach, and bingo, they're successful. One of them just was in the Super Bowl last year. I mean, I hate to scare somebody off. You take a teacher where she's been, a principal where she's been there, teachers think she does great things, you can see positive growth, it's demonstrated at that building level. Why chase them out of there?
so actually, if you're asking for my professional opinion on what strongly preferred was, I would say it has less of a chilling impact on potential non-superintendent applicants. It has less of an impact, but what it does have is a stronger impact on folks with actual superintendent experience in mind. So it's not that it deters those folks that may be building level administrators, central office administrators, whatever. What it says to practicing superintendents is that the Tecumseh board is serious about wanting somebody with prior superintendent experience. I don't share that to agree or disagree. I'm just saying that's usually how it would impact
You
the
think
pools.
those other people would still apply?
Yeah, I mean, reality of superintendent search in Michigan now is it's principal's game,
Okay,
right?
okay,
Most superintendent jobs in Michigan go to a principal,
okay.
and they know that. And so they'll toss, and they have less risk in applying than the superintendent does. And so if they toss their hat in the ring and they get an interview, it's a feather in their cap, as opposed to a
Okay.
superintendent tossing their hat in the ring, getting an interview, they're in a lot of trouble.
Right.
So it's just, that's why it has a different impact, although in normal circumstance outside search, what you described is absolutely true, right? Just kind of one of those weird things about superintendent search. So Tommy, where you landed on that? Do you want the strongly left in or taken out?
I don't care.
I still like it.
It can stay in. I'm with you, I don't think it will.
So let's check in on just the rest of that section. Is there anything else that you saw was either there and it didn't need to be, or it needs to be added, something needs to be revised, or something that needs to be deleted? Okay. So let's look at personal.
Isn't it kind of inspires trust and motivates people towards a common cause and demonstrates value in and appreciation of staff, and that kind of staff relationship thing? Kind of the same thing?
Well, I think they're interrelated, but generally this demonstrates value and appreciation of staff is something very specific that staff is looking for.
Yeah, I think that's.
If they didn't do that, they might have a difficult time inspiring trust and motivating. people.
That's true.
So
Very
that's
good
probably
point.
that connection
Yeah.
there.
You know, like maybe something about transparency.
Honest and open?
Yeah, but that word transparency has been so hot right now that we should use that as well.
So let's move that transparency piece to the management and decision-making section. So I've just made a note and then we'll flesh it out. Greg, that means you've got time to do it.
Yeah.
How exciting.
I think the open and honest and high professional ethics are pretty synonymous with each other.
So you want to strike the ethics?
I mean, no, I
Oh,
don't.
yeah, really, you think somebody that's unethical will go, oh, I'm not ethical, I can't go apply.
I think we
You're
should,
not gonna- you're not gonna do it.
I think instead of having it as its own, we can put it in that first line.
Yeah, I mean, you're laughing. I think we could strike the second half of the first line as consistent wording and decision-making. Well, consistency is kind of big.
Open and, honest and open, showing high professional ethics.
Okay.
Demonstrating high professional.
Consistently demonstrating.
Yeah, I like the consistency, look, consistent.
I'm compromising.
You get that right?
Honest and open, consistently portraying high,
Demonstrating how.
demonstrating high professional ethics. Thank you.
So that third bullet then can be mixed once you're done with that. I feel like the second bullet is wrong. I feel like it should be oriented to the best interest of the students.
Yeah.
In the school district, or just the students who tell me.
Of students and teachers. Students and teachers.
If there's no school district, I can assure you the teachers are in trouble.
I like it just students. Well, and the school, I guess it's six families.
Talk it over.
Students and just school districts. So I mean, there's more than just teachers here too. We've got administrators,
Right, yeah.
we've got support staff.
Well, about parents and students.
Well, if you have the best interest of the students, then
Okay, so can everybody live with students in school district?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we struck the next one, so then the next one to look at would be inspires trust and motivates people to a strong cause.
well, we basically put that up in the first one. We didn't really strike it, right?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
incorporated it,
Right.
yes, you're correct.
How about the last two?
Yeah, you're good. You're good at
I
that.
think the inspires trust, if we could just make that more about, instead of it saying people, have it say staff and community, or just staff.
So we're gonna change people to staff and community?
Yeah, people just kind of ambiguous. I mean, I think the biggest thing that this goes back to the team building, where this comes in is, you know, we want to inspire trust and motivate our staff towards a common cause. But if we wanted to add community with that as well, I think at minimum, it should say staff.
Okay.
Is everybody good with that? So it's staff, staff and community or just staff?
Which one?
I think staff and community.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah, there it is right there, staff and community.
Although I can kind of strike numbers and just say staff and communities, so it's consistent. So
Strike that last one too.
Strike
Match
numbers.
those two.
Yeah, just get rid of members, I'm saying, that word.
Oh.
All right, take a minute and think about what you said, what you thought on your own was important. And you may have made a note on your sheet or not. Is anything that you have written down fall in the category of personal or professional or vision? Just checking to see if we, just don't want you to forget what you thought about before you got here. If not, we're going to move into management and decision making.
I think the other one, and I think it's gonna fall more in management decision making for me, was wanting to work with this board.
So,
We're still in personal?
no, we're in management decision making.
You know, at least sharing common concepts, you know, their common vision with the board.
So works collaboratively with the school board?
Are we adding?
Isn't
We're-
that pretty much the first one though? Collaborative leadership style?
Well, this is an explicit statement about the relationship with the Board of Education.
We'd want to share a common vision or goal with whoever we bring in. I mean, we can't butt heads with the new superintendent, so, you know, if they had a different outlook than we did, even if they were a great candidate, I don't think that would be a good fit. So I think that someone who is going to want to work with us and understand who we are and what our visions are. So I think we need to throw that in there. I mean, I think that working with the board is obviously a common theme for any superintendent, but with all the controversy and everything else going on, you know, we're gonna wanna make sure they share our vision and wanna work with us.
Okay, so then let me just suggest that we have to revisit the first bullet in the vision. Because this says, has a vision for the success of Tecumseh Public Schools. And that's not what you're saying. You're saying that you're looking for somebody who's going to work with the board to establish a shared vision for Tecumseh Public Schools.
I think the second bullet under vision actually covers that, can work with the board.
And community to create a tangible plan for attaining that vision.
So
I
I
think-
covered it there.
No, they're doing different things. And so I I just think we have to make that revision to the first. Because one implies that they're bringing vision, the other one implies that it's yet to be established once this person is here.
And that should be a collaborative effort with,
It should be, that's what the research
Right.
tells us, right? And so, let's do that there.
you're putting that up under vision.
Well, I'm gonna write it out and then read it, you guys can tell me, and he'll type it in and see.
Under vision, all right.
Yes. So, works collaboratively with the Board of Education to establish a shared vision of success for Tecumseh Public Schools.
Read that again.
Works collaboratively with the Board of Education to establish a shared vision of success for Tecumseh Public Schools.
I like it. Do you like it?
Are we good with that?
Yeah.
You're having
Is
a
that true?
good time.
Donna, you get the last part.
Oh, so this one takes the place of the first one.
Yep,
Okay.
yeah.
And it works collaboratively with the Board of Education to establish a shared vision of success for Tecumseh Public Schools. So while he's working on that, we're gonna adjust, not right now, but back in the office. We're gonna adjust these next two just to have consistent, because you know how this one starts, the first one starts with works collaboratively. So instead of can work, it'll be works with the board and community and creates a process, just so that, just.
Right,
Kind of
so flow
grammar,
better, yeah.
yeah.
Can we add, sorry, I'm not making, but can we add, can work with the board staff and community to create tangible plan? Because I think we want everybody involved.
Yes.
No, down, I'm sorry, down below.
Yeah, I
It
have
says
it.
can work with the board,
Oh.
staff, and community to create a tangible plan.
On the way back.
Can't believe you made me drive, it was an awful lot.
Because when you're the one typing, it's the worst. Everybody's watching.
Right.
Okay, so
I thought he's
let's.
a good typer.
He is. He's just a good soul all the way around. So let's give Greg a minute to work through that, and while he's doing that, let's turn our attention back to management and decision making. Now, we know that we want to add something in this section about transparency, right? So let's think about, what does that mean to you? And what is the context that you'd like to see transparency? Talk to me more about that.
I mean, just the openness. I mean, this is, tax dollars being used in the school system. And I feel that people need to know exactly where those tax dollars are going, how the school is performing,
So-
what is the student outcomes.
That might-
How, not only how this was performing, but with proof
Right.
Right, data driven.
that that's how this was performing.
Yeah, and then
not
they're
just
trying
because you
this,
said
this
so.
thing new, and then we have proof that it's working, and so no.
Okay, so we're bleeding issues together, so we're probably gonna break some of those out. So let's tackle the first one, which is, maybe, how does this sound? Leads the district in an open and transparent manner. That's good. So, I'm gonna circle the first bullet, collaborative leadership style, because it might just be that we're gonna cover that well enough in the first paragraph, the one we haven't tackled yet. So if that's the case, we may strike that. So you guys brought up another issue, which is this idea about database decision-making and being transparent about accountability. Not those right words, but what does that look like? Maybe we can select. Are you back with us, Ray?
Yeah, I found it.
Okay.
Isn't the second one, and the third one kind of the same, or no? Effective supervision and oversight of professionals.
Yeah, one is specific to that kind of cabinet and central office and building level administrators, but we certainly could do some sort of adjustment or revision to either or both. To where the second one is much more about, across the board, all staff.
I think one of the words I'd like to see in there somewhere is accountability. I think that was,
So when you say effective supervision, that's basically meaning that you want to know your administrators are doing.
what's that?
Accountability, how are you?
Okay, I have a suggestion on accountability, then we're going to come back to yours.
Okay.
So can we add, under management decision-making, can we add a bullet that is utilizes data for decision-making and accountability? Or shares data for decision-making and accountability?
Yeah, I like this.
Yeah, I like that. I think in my mind, accountability is, we found a lot of things in the last, well, we've been here 7 months, and we found a lot of areas where there was no accountability, where there were, I want to make sure that, we have that. We got a lot of things, we want, but
Yeah.
I think accountability.
Some- Add shares in front of it, so it shares and utilizes, and I think that'll capture it there. So then it'll read shares and utilizes data for accountability and decision-making, and
Yeah.
accountability.
Just accountability, I think, will drive a lot of the changes that we're looking for.
Okay, so that took care of that. Let's go back to this issue. So this bullet that says effective supervision and oversight of professionals is about your prospective superintendent's ability to supervise and oversee professionals.
I haven't looked at equity down in that area, did that, we're looking for an administrator with experience in organizing, supervising, and delegating responsibility to personnel in the system, and evaluating the outcome and providing feedback to the board and community.
That's good.
That's long.
What he said.
Drop it down.
Yeah.
Greg, did you get that?
So that's gonna go where? Is that
Let's
replacing?
just get it in the management and decision-making section for now, and then we'll break it apart and see what it replaces.
All right.
So that means you have to read
Can
it
we
again.
say that
Slowly.
slower?
Okay,
Want to just give them that?
yeah,
Okay, that's a good idea.
I gotta know something positive.
While you're giving that to him, so we're gonna come back to management decision-making. Let's stroll down to interpersonal and work on that, so that it'll give Greg some time to catch up.
I like it too.
If we could,
But line 2, we got, that's kind of going throughout the.
Willing to bring together groups.
I think lines 2 and 3 should be 1 and 2, and then line 1 would be line 3.
Wait a minute, doesn't matter what orders they're in.
Well, it does. I think it absolutely does.
Why?
Because I think whenever you create a bullet list, you want your most important things at the top. Because when people read these
They're all
things,
important.
but when people read these things, they typically put more importance on the top ones than they do on the bottom ones. It's just human nature.
So what do you think should be at the top?
Able to bring together groups, individuals with,
Can everybody live with that being the first bullet?
What did you want, Phil?
The bottom one.
Transparency? Oh, no,
Visible,
visible.
accessible to staff, students. That's very
And
important.
what are you looking at for number 1?
it's basically team building. Basically bringing everybody together.
Try to say two should be number one.
Yes.
What's up first?
Just make John happy, put that one
Yeah,
first.
no.
So,
Life is a lot easier with me, John Nancy.
does that work?
Good Lord.
So that, so,
Mel, would you be okay with?
how are you, Greg?
The big judge.
Are you with us?
Two.
Okay. Greg, so will you move the second bullet to the first slot?
Collaborative leadership plan.
No, interpersonal.
No, we're on interpersonal.
Sorry.
That's okay. We did a side project while you were working. So able to bring together to number one, and then visible and accessible to staff, students, and community is number two.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay. How are we now on this interpersonal section? Okay. Anything missing? Okay. We're ready to go back to management and decision making then? Let's see what Greg has done. Experience in organizing, supervising, and delegating responsibility to personnel in the system. I would leave that as a single bullet. And then, it is good all together though. Okay, maybe.
Sure.
So what in that section will you strike based on that?
Based on what?
The supervision one, effective supervision and oversight of professionals?
Yeah, probably is that is the bottom one.
Yep, I agree. Oh,
Yep, we can delete that, Greg.
yep.
I almost think you could mix that up one too if you chose to, but it's
Well,
not hurting anything. It doesn't hurt anything.
What contract negotiation? Does that need to be?
It was there, where'd it go?
It still is.
No question.
Oh, you tell me.
Any administrator, even if it wasn't a prior superintendent, would have to, no?
No, not
Oh.
necessarily.
But they're probably gonna bring an attorney in. I mean, I don't feel it's,
I agree. At the end of the day, you're gonna sell your attorney for your anything. It's a contract negotiation, essentially budgeting, so you can afford it the next 3 years. So,
what's your opinion?
Really depends on how high stakes it is in a given district. So I don't know how your last rounds of negotiation have gone.
how long are they gonna keep us? I mean, we got great student, teachers and union that I don't see it that being a problem in negotiation at all. So,
Do you think it can be removed?
I think.
Yeah, I can, I
Okay,
agree.
let's take it off. Okay, looking back at your own notes, is there anything missing in that management and decision-making section that we need to add? Okay, so before we do the top paragraph, before we do the room supervision, okay, so I want you to imagine that I've sent you an email and given you access to the applicant file, okay? And so you're looking at resumes and cover letters and, is this what you're looking for? Is there something else you're gonna be looking for in those resumes and cover letters that we haven't touched on yet?
Some things are just contained. We'll have to meet them face to face and have those discussions.
That's a part of it. I'm just trying to make sure that one of those obvious things, you know what I mean, that you know you're gonna look for. Talk about it.
If we could change any stakeholders to community.
Well, to leave that stakeholders though, does really states everybody, right?
The community is everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
And we've used that verbiage throughout, so.
okay, yeah, that's good. Thank you for finding it.
The other thing is, if you have anything, you can have all this, but we need somebody who can make difficult decisions too.
Yeah. So should we talk about that in management decision making? Sounded to me though that you're expecting them to make that based on data.
Hang on, Don, 1 second. So that
Yes.
last one, is that staff and community like we've said throughout? Or
I
is it
like
just
staff and
community?
community. You guys?
Yeah, let's keep it consistent.
No, I think Mike's is a bit of a run-on. Experience in organizing,
It's about-
supervising, and delegating responsibility to personnel in the system, meaning do the work here.
Well, we could take it in the
You can
system
just take
out and
out
just
the
say
Yeah, get rid of
personnel.
in the system.
That's fine.
And then no and right there either.
Oh, the and.
Oh, yeah, no and's gotta stay, and
Yeah.
evaluate the outcomes. No, there's 2 ands, you don't need 2 ands. A comma, get rid of 1 and.
No, you do need 2 ends.
If you say
That comment needs to come out of that.
experience in organizing, supervising, delegating responsibility to personnel, evaluating the outcomes of providing feedback. No, I think all those ands go in the comments here. Until the last and.
We'll run it through our
Okay.
grammar
Yeah.
Nazis.
Yeah.
If they don't let us do much without them.
You just about sponsor.
Too many ands.
Okay.
Your ands are all used up.
Anything new that we want to surface that hasn't hit this yet? Looking at your notes, thinking about what you thought about, and you knew what we were going to talk about tonight, so you had time to think about it. All right, then let's just visit this top paragraph to see. Now, we know that maybe we didn't get the verbiage right on what we're trying to create here for students, so I have a note about that. But let's look at it in totality. So is it not a great educational experience for all students? You're really looking to is there a different outcome that you have?
I like that. I don't think that's.
Maybe something like great educational experience for all students that prepares them for whatever their path is. I don't know, I don't want it too wordy, but something that says we're preparing them for their future,
Right, no matter.
whatever they choose.
Right, whether it's college or grades.
Comparison, for educational, most students, a comparison for their future.
There you go.
There you go.
Just add and prepares them for the future.
That prepares.
That prepares.
Well, that prepares them. The or their future?
Or you decide that.
I think it should be there.
Grammar not being helpful.
I know. Sometimes I send her stuff and she's like, what were you doing?
I think
Nice to
their
meet
future, I think that kind of gives the connotation of what their choice is.
Yeah.
All right, we good?
But what if we add transparent after strong?
Strong, transparent, collaborative.
See, you don't have all those ands in there.
That's funny.
I like it.
That's a lot of adjectives in a row.
Yeah, I think we kind of covered it in here enough.
Yeah,
I think you can work with all staff.
I think it looks good.
I like it.
I do too.
All right. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good work on this.
Good luck with us.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Greg.
So just sort of thinking about next steps. So we're going to add this to the posting, of course, that's already up. And, you notice on your timeline there's a little lag between when the posting closes and when we get it to you. Although it's not huge. And so you just know that you need to allocate time on your own personal calendars to be able to go through all of that information before we meet to determine who we're going to invite for interview. So just be thinking ahead and make sure you block out some time. I know your lives get very busy, and so that's just a case of where you're gonna have a lot that you need to go through. And then just know it's gonna be a couple of days before you hear from me once it closes, so you don't let that surprise you. When you get the email, it'll give you a direct link to that. And just as a reminder, when Brad was here, we talked to you about this, that that's not something that you share, right? It's strictly confidential. Candidates are entitled to confidentiality. So you're not even supposed to discuss it with your spouse.
Did you say you'd send us an email earlier today? Okay.
Before the next one.
No, earlier I thought you said you'd send us something earlier today, and I didn't get it, so I just wanted to make sure. But maybe you didn't say that.
Oh, no, I was probably referring to the materials.
Yes.
Because even though we tend to bring copies, we should quit, because you've already made them for us when we get here. Because you can do it to us. So that's how she said she can do it.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, I've gotten a couple emails that I was looking out on things, that my name was spelled wrong, so I just want to make sure.
Oh, from us.
No.
Oh, well, that happens with the transfer. Okay, so you'll get that communication from me. You'll have some time to get through the materials. When Greg and I come back, that will be an open meeting, but we'll be referring to those candidates really strictly by number and not by name. And you know that you asked the attorney about that when he's here. He affirmed that yes, that was appropriate. Also, when we get together, we'll go through kind of the do's and don'ts, and we will firm up interview questions at that point in time. Okay, so that's what our next steps are. You've got a little breather in between. All right.
Have you gotten any so far?
We don't look at applications seriously until after the selection criteria are posted, because I jokingly refer to those as the amateurs. Like, what do you want before you see the selection criteria? Come on, right?
Because they never want something.
Yes, but they are definitely looking, because I told you I've got folks who I've had preliminary conversations with, and some I've just flat out said, listen, I'm going to call you after I've had time to get the selection criteria and the board. Just because the first question they ask me is usually like, are there internal applicants? And then, what is the board looking for? Do I seem to be a close match to the board? Of course, those are all pretty straightforward conversations. I've already had a couple conversations just about strategy with some folks who are practicing superintendents, kind of thinking about how do they address the issues with the board back home if they apply for this job and not get it, and those kinds of things. Those are normal conversations. So, thank you. Any questions? Great.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move on to the consent agenda. Approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of July 30th and approval of the July checkers. Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Items scheduled for next agenda for the robotics team, the teacher hires, preliminary audit report and timeline for Nikki.
Bless you.
Finance, facilities.
So, Greg, we have facilities.
Yes, Mike will be here for facilities. Okay.
And then,
Where's everything was that week? Like this week, so we can look at it.
Are we gonna approve it? Oh,
We're going to
We
need
have-
Chad Rogers
so,
wanted to
ready.
be here to give you an update.
yes, so what's
That's
that,
your conference you went to.
Oh, great.
Chad Rogers.
But we're gonna get it. Terry's gonna email us a copy of that.
Yes. Terry, what was it now?
But we want that as an action item, right?
It will.
Right.
And
And then
then
you'll also have the math department come in here.
Okay.
You said it, okay.
Man.
All right, that's a busy meeting.
And then, did we find anything out about the terms? We discussed it. The terms are all
Change it to a 4-year term.
changing for
Oh,
your
no,
terms.
that's right. We didn't talk about that. Did we? Somebody, we need to get with, make sure it's the right year so it falls right, so.
I can go Roxanne.
Can you handle that? Okay. And then, I guess, talk to Kyle and see if there's any, I know something changed in the state law or something, that you had to do it. And I don't know what that was, so.
6 years, 4 years, right?
Yeah. All right, anything else for next meeting? Anybody want to come up with?
Is that next meeting?
I believe so, I can't remember, but I believe so.
I don't think that's.
I'd like a buzzing update one of these days.
I put a schedule together.
Oh, okay, good,
so
maybe you can
there's,
send us that.
Like technologies tonight,
Right,
and food service will have transportation in their quarter.
okay.
And starting to look at what the department agencies reports.
Do you have like an overview of that, what you can send us?
All right, so that brings us to our second public comment portion of the meeting. The agendas are full, each speaker is only 3 minutes. If you'd like to make a comment, please come up to the podium and state your name. Okay, and then the board comment discussion.
We're all talked out?
We're all talked out?
Johnny, you happy?
I'm happy.
Okay.
Greg, you want to add anything? Or?
Oh, sure.
Yes, sir. Okay. All right.